But
the key is the condition of possibility for the mosh pit.
Condition of possibility. Okay, hello and welcome to this week's Life of the Party, a deep dive into everything to do with your party, the Green Party, a New Left Party, whichever party we all end up being a part of. I'm your host, Todd, and I am here happy and hungover in 2026 with Jonas, Marvin.
Happy New Year.
And Shanice, McBean.
Happy 2026, folks.
I mean, we're slightly taking the piss and we're kind of lying to you because it is still 2025 and we are pre-recording this.
It's literally not even Christmas yet.
It's not even Christmas. It's not even Christmas. It's like the 19th of December. We are pre-recording this because we need a break as every human on this planet does. Look, you're getting your January episodes and I hope you're happy about that, but it is not being recorded in January. We're very sorry about it. This week we are going to do something a bit different. This week, we are going to have a bit of a look ahead at 2026. We're going to look into our crystal balls and make some predictions for what we think is going to happen in the year, which is an absolutely terrible idea. And I'm sure it's going to come back to bite us later on in the podcast. And we're also going to look back at 2025 a little bit and hand out some awards for the good and the bad, the good and the bad of 2025. Yeah, that's going to be the episode this week. But before we do all that, I just want to say that, obviously the response to the podcast has been incredible. We keep saying that. Now the financial response to the podcast has been really good because we've set up our little Patreon thing, which is not a Patreon, but is a Patreon, lifeoftheparty.uk/support. And, some of you are actually giving us money to do this, which is incredibly cool and really, really important. The thing we want to do is do this more. The other thing that we want to do is do this and not have adverts because we fucking hate podcasts with adverts, or at least I despise podcasts with adverts. I understand why people do it. You have to fund it, but for me, it absolutely kills the experience of listening to a podcast. So if you want to keep this without any advertising shitting in your head, even if it's a nice advert from Verso, even if it's that, like just, give us some money if you can. lifeoftheparty.uk/support. Cool. That's all the announcements from me.
There is just one thing that I wanted to say, because I think we need to acknowledge the tragedy that's happened with Jonas getting beaten up in the middle of the night. Jonas, I'm really sorry this happened to you. Do you want to tell us what happened?
I was so nervous when you started talking about that tragedy, and then you went, you started talking about my name. Just to be clear, Shanice is talking about the fact that my cat is beating me up at night. Several times now I'm waking up with swollen black eyes because my lovely one-eyed cat Habibi thinks it's appropriate to whack me when I'm asleep.
He's trying to make you join the club.
Apparently it's an act of love.
The one-eyed club.
I'm not down for it, Habibi. Stop it.
Okay. So before we can look ahead to 2026, we obviously have to look back to 2025 a little bit. And there's many ways we could do that, but we've decided to do this in the form of awards. So we're going to be giving out awards to individuals, to groups who are associated with the Green Party and, your party and this New Left Party project. Just to, recognize some of the contributions that were made in 2025. And we've each come up with our suggestions for these. We have not conferred before, so I have no idea what Jonas and Shanice will come up with. We'll start on a positive note. Shanice, who is your hero of the year?
So my hero has to go to Archie Woodrow. Because
I just whacked my mics.
Because that guy did investigative journalism bits, and actually a lot of his work really fed into this podcast. And, I think he really did a good job of getting to the bottom of some of the drama and factional maneuvers and beef that was taking place in your party. And he was very clear-sighted about it, politically really sharp, seems to have really great sources. And actually, I just think as an example of movement journalism, it was just fantastic stuff. So yeah, my hero is definitely Archie.
Yeah, I mean, I should have thought of that because my summaries at the start of some of the episodes last year would have been a fucking nightmare if it weren't for Archie. Like an absolute nightmare. Jonas, who you got?
I completely ignored the brief, basically.
Of course. Wasn't this your brief? I think you came up with
No,
this brief,
that's not true. The awards was definitely Shanice's idea. And if you know Shanice, that would make total sense that she would come up with the idea of an awards. But no, I didn't come up with a hero from your party, the Green Party, or any of that really. I thought I'd go a bit left field, and I came up with the Birmingham bin workers because I thought they deserved the shout, man. Like they've been on strike for 9 months. This is one of the most significant labour struggles to develop in recent memory. They're like trying to protect themselves from an $8,000 slash in their pay packet, and there's all sorts of politics around the dispute, around the kind of imagery of Birmingham and rubbish piling up on the street and the kind of racial politics to it. But I also think and this is a real question for organisations like your party and the Green Party, councils across the country, Birmingham is one of them, but this will confront Stoke, this may confront Manchester, are likely to be submitting 144 bankruptcy notices in the near future. And so struggles like this between bin workers and the council will spread everywhere at some point. And so the fate of what happens in those kind of future battles is really bound up with the success of the bin workers, and they've been fighting an almighty struggle. And yeah, they've got a mega picket on the 30th of January coordinated by Strike Map, so everyone should get down to that.
Do you know what? I really love this example, number one, because I'm from Birmingham, so obviously there's that connection. But it also reminds me of the Young Lords bin action.
Oh, okay. What's that?
So for those who don't remember or who don't know, the Young Lords were part of the Rainbow Coalition with the Black Panthers and the, what were they called? The Patriots.
Young Patriots, was it?
Was it the Young Patriots?
No, it might not.
Anyway, the group of kind of white working class comrades. And the Young Lords actually did an action where they tipped loads of kind of the rubbish that was collecting in the community into the streets to force the local administrators to actually do something about the fact that their streets weren't clean, rubbish wasn't being collected regularly, and the health of the community wasn't being looked after. So there is actually a long history of kind of like bins and rubbish and community organising and that imagery being part of working class struggle. So I find that connection quite pleasing.
Yeah, and it's just, I mean, there's just so much to the politics of like bins and bin collection, isn't there? I mean, it's just like it's a huge thing at a council level and at a local level. It's this example of, to use a pandemic era phrase, your archetypal key worker, where they stop working and then suddenly, the nice clean life that you live just completely changes, and you're surrounded by all of this rubbish that you create and someone has to take away. And I suppose it's just one of those archetypal symbols of like society in decline, right? It's like, the bins aren't even been emptied. So it's just, there's so much there, isn't there? There's so much there. I just chose Zach Polanski. That's so boring. I just chose Zach. I just chose Zach, and I chose Zach for really obvious reasons. He's clearly done an amazing job, like getting the Greens to cut through, and it's absolutely crazy that the Greens are in a place where they could potentially surpass Labour in the polls. And he's just kind of come from nowhere to do that. And I think him running and winning the leadership of the Green Party, it was just a real turning point, because I don't think Zara and Jeremy would have got their act together and launched something if there hadn't been the pressure and the fact that Zach was running for the Greens and could well win it. So I just like, if anyone kind of kicked off that whole series of events from, May onwards, of Zara leaving the Labour Party and your party forming and the Greens being led from an eco-populist position, it was Zach's decision to run in that leadership campaign.
Yeah.
So he's my hero. Can't believe you didn't pick him, Shanice.
He's my hero.
That was cringe, bruv.
I'm really glad we do accents on this podcast. I just think it's good. It's good that we've established we do accents. I think that's fantastic.
Within limits.
We'll have a bloopers reel. We'll have a bloopers reel one day of like every accent that we've done that's not all right. All right. villains. Come on. Who's your
All
villain?
right, I'll start.
Also, we're never going to get through all of these. We're gonna have to pick some of these. I'll pick some of these, but we'll do villains. Go on.
My villain is Carrie, who had a Scottish accent at the Your Party conference. So we don't know who this is.
I hate to break it to you. I don't think this is a bulletproof legal defense. I think we've taken this position that if we never say her second name, then we can't get sued. But is that how
we do
works?
also say her surname all of the time.
We actually don't know who it is, right? We don't have any solid 100% evidence, but there was a Carrie who had a Scottish accent at Your Party conference, who was part of the organising committee or group for the conference, who actually utilised conference security to kick Your Party members out. And I just don't have any truck with the idea of using kind of security infrastructure as a political tool against your comrades. That is just an absolute no for me.
What about if it's the SWP though?
Nah, still no. I've got my own fists and I got my own mouth. But if I need to do something, then I can do something, and I don't need to use security or cops or whatever it is.
Yeah, Shanice's done her own kicking when it concerns the SWP.
Yeah, that's a fair one. I assume she'd come up.
Yeah, of course. The Rasputin-like figure would have to happen, wouldn't it? My villain is, again, not following the brief. My villain is Alan Milburn. You guys know Alan Milburn?
What?
No.
What, isn't the old Labour minister?
Keep your eyes peeled on this guy, man. Honestly, former health secretary under Blair. He is behind everything that West Street and Liz Kendall have been doing at the minute. Like all of their attempts to corral the sick, disabled, and the poor into hard, poorly paid work, putting work coaches on hospitals and mental health wards, rolling out weight loss jabs. And he's responsible now for a report on the economic inactivity of the young. And I just think that's, that keep an eye. The guy's a class enemy in the purest sense. And yeah, keep an eye on him.
Mm.
We'll do best faction. Go on. We'll do best faction.
My best faction has to be the Democratic Socialists in Your Party. And that is because it's not because I agree with them on absolutely everything. I think there are some kind of divergences of opinions there, particularly on kind of conference democracy and branch sovereignty and those sorts of questions. But I think the way they have organised both on social media and online, organising debates, really kind of enriching the political discussion, and then the way they organised around conference, bringing motions, speaking from the conference floor, organising at conference. I think it's really commendable. I think it's really an example of what a lively, vibrant, democratic culture of debate and discussion and kind of comradely disagreement can look like. So yeah, it's Democratic Socialists for me.
Yeah, I obviously signed up to their email list at some point and gave them my phone number. And I mean this in a really good way, I got so many WhatsApp messages from different members of that faction being like, hey Joe, thanks for signing up. Do you want to come to a welcome call at this point? Or hey Joe, would you like to have a one-to-one chat and talk about... And I was like, oh, wow. I mean, I didn't respond to any of them for my sins. but no shade. It's not because I didn't care. I was very impressed by their level of organisation. They clearly just had a lot of people doing significant and really important outreach to members. So yeah, I totally agree. I found them really impressive.
Yeah, and they achieved a lot. You have to commend them on that. I'm just keeping it tribal, man. 100%. My faction is organising for popular power. That's the best faction for me. That's why I'm in it. I just think it's a faction it isn't the moment for this faction in lots of ways, because the kind of internal nature of party formation kind of ensures that, really. But it's been quietly growing, plugging away at its agenda, trying to cohere an outwards looking agenda for a party that is kind of desperately disorientated. And this isn't shade on the other factions, because they have their eyes in this direction, but I think it's the only faction at the moment that's thinking meaningfully about class struggle and what's happening outside of the party.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Whilst I vote and support the stuff being put forward, particularly by the Democratic Socialists, that's where my heart is, and the comrades there are doing great work.
Mine was the Bolshevik tendency.
I guess the question didn't specify in what year, did it?
No. The Bolshevik tendency signed up to the Socialist Unity platform for the conference. Like, you know, their tagline. So if you go on their website, it's in German, not in English. And their tagline is for the rebirth of the Fourth International ! Yeah, and they signed on to that Socialist Unity platform. So, you know, when I saw that, I was like, wow.
I'm trying to work through how many rebirths of the Fourth International have happened by now. No, it's just...
I mean, I wouldn't know.
Maybe
we need one more.
Quite a few.
There is split. There from a little bit of googling, there is split from the Spartacus League in the 80s.
Completely normal.
Yeah.
But why your best faction? Talk
no, I mean, I'm joking.
Oh, you're trolling.
I'm trolling. I mean, no, my real best factions. I suppose it's got to be Greens organised because I'm obviously the Green on the podcast. But I do mean it in the sense that they're in this really funny position where organisationally they're kind of hegemonic within the party because they just don't have, you know, organised opposition, and they're in this very different position to those in your party and those in the Labour Party, where they, I think, are trying to maintain that hegemony without increasing the overall levels of factionalism within the party, because it is quite like united and collegiate. So it's a strange balance of how do you not kick off an arms race in a way between different parts of the party whilst also building organisation. And I think largely they're just doing quite a good job of that. And I was really just impressed by the kind of people that they were putting up to speak at their event at conference. And, you know, they have this focus on trying to build the Green Party into, yes, a socialist party, but I think more of a working class party. Like, and they're quite explicit about that, and you can see that through the people that they're building up. And for me, that's exciting, and just like very interesting. And you know, they have money and members, and they've just recently hired staff. Like they're like a real thing.
Are you doing this so that they help you get back in to the Green Party?
I'm just ignoring the email at the moment. I should stop talking publicly about this because it never helps me. But I'm just ignoring the email at the moment. So I'm gonna get another email. No, I'm not. Yeah, no. I mean, no, I'm not. I'm not trying to suck up.
Joe, you're like a chess player.
But if it helps,
you're like a chess player that tells your opponent what your next move is
in public.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. We'll see. We'll just see. Let's do one or two more of these from each of you. Do either of you have one that's like burning for you? Like, which ones do you really want to say?
I've got a best communicator.
Go on. Who's your best communicator?
Bob Villain. Death to the idea.
Oh yeah, fair.
That's okay. That's a good one. That's a good one.
I thought you were going to go straight for the Zoran Mondani.
No, it's too easy. It's way too easy to say Zoran. Nah, Bob Villain, man. Identify an enemy, accentuate the counterculture, and speak truth to power. Boom.
Yeah, there's nothing else to say on that, is there? It's like one of the best examples of countercultural politics in a decade, maybe even more.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Bad man. Big him up.
Yeah, fair.
I was at his Glastonbury set, and it was nuts. It was
guys. I met Bob Villain at the Black Lives Matter conference. It was the most fangirl moment ever. I turned the corner to go to like one of the meetings that were happening, and I saw both of them, Bobby and Bobby, and I ran up to them. I was like, "Yo, Safe, what's up? Why are you here?" It was honestly the cheesiest thing ever. But then I was like, oh, you know, I organised with Sisters Uncut, and they were like, oh, I know Sisters Uncut's work. So we had a political vibe as well. So yeah, big up Bob Villain.
Oh mate, I was in the pit for that, and there was just like 300 people smashing themselves into each other.
Amazing.
And then you just turn around and there's just people trying to like delicately do like keys of cocaine in each pit. I understand the desire and I get how these two things meld together, but like one act is quite an aggressive one and another one is like quite a delicate one because you're putting something relatively sharp up your nose. Maybe you want to back away from this environment.
But one act is the condition of possibility for the other, right?
No, shut up.
The key is the condition of possibility for the mosh pit.
Condition of possibility. Yeah, I don't even know where that's a quote from. Tell me, where is that a quote?
It's not a quote. It's just words.
What? The condition of possibility is definitely a phrase you've listened from.
It's just a phrase people use, isn't it, man? Just normal people walking down the street use that phrase all of the time.
Shut the fuck up. Oh, I'm going to go down after this and talk about the condition of possibility, trying to get my housemate to cook me a lunch. What is the condition of possibility that will push you to make me a cheesesteak? Shanice, which one do you really want to go for?
I'm loath to mention this person and this organisation on our beloved podcast.
Sounds like you want to, though. Sounds like you want to.
But I do think politically I do want to make this point. And so I'm going to go for worst conference contribution, which for me has to be the SWP's Amy Leather. And
Go for it.
Jonas can see why I'm loath to raise this, but actually I think it's important. So Amy Leather was part of the Central Committee of the SWP, and I'm sure we'll go into this in much more depth in a future episode, and was kind of making a conference contribution at the Your Party conference around kind of democracy and how awful it is to kick out, and expel members for political reasons. I do want to note in the public sphere, however, the role that Amy Leather played in the kind of Comrade Delta sexual assault case. She was one of the big headbangers on the Central Committee who was defending Martin Smith and really publicly attacking the women that came forward with their allegations. So I just think it's ironic that all these years later, there is now kind of like a conference floor contribution about democracy when actually she was central to the anti-democratic sexist manoeuvres of the SWP back then. So yeah, sad to have to say her name on the podcast and kind of raise it, but actually politically it feels important.
Well, maybe this links to one of mine, which was, we asked ourselves who or what is most likely to upset the CEC election results. What a particular question. On one hand, I'm like, well, maybe the most likely to upset the CEC election results from our perspective is Jeremy Corbyn, because maybe the faction around him, the so-called right of the party, will rally and actually do quite well in them. But the obvious other group is the SWP, because although they don't number a very large amount of people, maybe a couple of thousand, and there's 55,000 people who would vote in your party, it's not clear how high the turnout will be in that election. They obviously have a lot of power / control of various front groups that have big email lists that could be very influential in that election. And it's not impossible that they could do really quite well in it. And that, I think, would be bad for the party. We can go into it in more depth in future episodes. But yeah, I think that would be an upset for sure.
Yeah, I think it's unlikely that they will do well, but it would be bad if they did.
Why do you think? Why do you think it's unlikely?
I think there's a perceived strength, and then there's their actual strength. And I think often the perceived strength, the spectre of they have all of these front campaigns, and that means they're quite strong, is actually quite hollow. And they have increasingly less people with national stature. I think they'd be quite cautious about using any of those email lists for, it would put them in trouble using those email lists for something like Your Party, like if a stand up to racism or something like that, because it would mean they jeopardize all of that lovely support and funding they get from trade union caucuses and the left of the trade union bureaucracy. So yeah, I'd be quite surprised. I guess it also depends on that balance between. Well, no, it's all digital voting actually, so ignore that. But I think that lends itself against them, digital voting. To be honest with you, yeah. They're not that savvy with the internet.
Yeah, that's interesting. Just going back to the award of most likely to upset the CEC elections, I would probably say maybe someone from the Organising for Popular Power faction. I think actually it kind of chimes with what Jonas said earlier. The people in that faction are kind of movement radicals, really, really well-respected social movement leaders with a lot of experience, a lot of credibility, a lot of influence. There are characters, for example, who have been central over the last decade to the Black Lives Matter movement from 2014. I'm thinking of someone like Joshua Virasamy, for example, who I've organised with for over a decade. I have no idea who, if anyone from that faction is going to run, but just such a high caliber of kind of social movement cadre in that faction, I wouldn't be surprised if someone from that faction kind of came and was the dark horse in the CEC election.
Yeah, I think when I thought about this question, I very stupidly thought about the word upset as what would upset me most personally, which is clearly not what the word upset means in this question. Like, an upset in an election is an unexpected result. Like, that's what it is.
Yeah, of course it is.
But it's, but it's 6 days till Christmas. So,
nothing can get you down.
The brains are switched off.
That's my I'm just here for the baby Guinness. That's my whole thing now until the 25th. All right. And then look, do either of you want one more? You can have one more if you want.
Nah, I'm all good.
I would just say, we had a question of worst faction. The worst faction is always the one that doesn't declare itself, in my experience.
And which
Wait, so you've got to declare it now? Come on, you've got to just move a silent.
Well, it's the one around the so-called party right, the one that is basically moving like a faction but doesn't declare itself, right? Yeah. That's always the worst faction, in my opinion.
A wonderful place to move on.
Is it?
I think there's a relative.
So wonderful that we have this undeclared faction maneuvering and ruining your party.
But I will mean that, like, there's a level of insight and profundity to Jonas's statement.
Yeah, that's true.
Thank you, Joe.
So if we stick a little bit of transition music in there, people will be like, "Oh yeah, it's really smart." That thing that Jonas just said. And then we're back for predictions of 2026. All right, so in the second half of this episode, we are going to look forward to the year of 2026, which you are all now in. We are not quite in, but we're pretending to be in. And we've each come up with a political prediction for what's going to happen this year. And we're going to argue it. And we're going to argue why we think this thing's going to happen and why we think it's important. I was very lazily canvassing my housemates as to what my prediction should be, and they came up with absolutely nothing useful, which is why my prediction is quite boring. One of them was swim caps going to be big. I don't know if that means that, like, wild swimming's going to become more of a phenomenon. I don't know if it means that, people's heads are going to get bigger, but like that was one. Luigi Mangione releases an album with Fred again.
That would be wicked. And Skepta.
It'd be terrible.
I think that would be amazing.
And then I think this one's more possible. Prince Andrew makes a comeback. Like,
no way, absolutely not.
I think that. Oh, what a redemption arc! Come on.
Oh, no way.
What a redemption arc!
I think Lizzie might have been, but Charles is like, nah.
I mean, we'll see. We will see. But anyway, don't hold me to any of those because they're obviously stupid. But Jonas or Shanice, which of you want to go first?
I can go first. Look, I mean, left politics is like full of predictions that never come to fruition, right? And I'm sure, my prediction is what is Antonio Gramsci talks about pessimism of the intellect, optimism of the will, and mine's a bit optimism of the intellect, perhaps. But I think I agree with the British public, who in a recent Ipsos Mori survey, 68% of whom disagree that next year will breed greater optimism than 2025, and 74% of whom think there will be great unrest throughout the country in 2026. I think my prediction is basically that we're going to experience quite big, large-scale social rebellion in 2026, probably of the type we haven't seen the poll tax in the early 90s. I think this is for a few reasons. The kind of generational axis of the crisis at the minute can be quite well captured in the fact that 2 in 5 workers aged 16 to 24 years expect their health to deteriorate in the near future. The housing market now is more a mountain than a ladder. There's 13.4% youth unemployment. The news has been awash with the fact that unemployment generally has gone to 5.1, but 13.4% youth unemployment. Real wages have sunk under the cost of under the weight of the cost of living. Mental health crises plague a generation forced to accept crap work, living with their parents. Almost half of 25-year-olds live with their parents. That's a crazy number. And, today people overwhelmingly find sociality on their smartphones. And around 1 million of 16 to 24-year-olds now find themselves out of employment, education, or training. And terrifyingly, something that kind of connects all of these dots a third of 18 to 25-year-olds have never contributed to a workplace or private pension. So I really think we should expect some kind of mass social uprising this year, but in totally distinct form and content to what we may expect, what we may consider traditional forms of rebellion, something that's sporadic, something that is responsive to the kind of rising costs of food and energy, something that has a huge hostility to formal politics in ways that I think the left will find difficult and uncomfortable, and something that will have a bent towards younger people right across actually the kind of country's uneven geography. You know, we see flashes of this stuff, but the confluence of the social crisis that I'm kind of talking about here, plus this kind of inflation massively affected by kind of war and climate change, and the fact that, you know, apart from the local elections, we are absent national elections perhaps for 3 or 4 years. I'll be interested to see, one, if I'm right, but two, if the left is prepared to meet an uprising like this in the midst of this kind of transition to party building and electoralism, which can often feel a bit more schematic. So that's my prediction for 2026.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. And you used the word uncomfortable. And I think another aspect, if I were to make a prediction that might be uncomfortable for the left, is the anti-authoritarian, anti-elitist slant that I think resistance will likely take. If you look at the past 10 years of rebellion on the left and the right, there has been a solid anti-police, anti-elite, anti-authoritarian thread that has run through everything. That's from Black Lives Matter to the Sarah Everard and Kill the Bill protests, to the pro-Palestine movement, to the anti-migrant movement, to the various different strands of anti-elitism, whether it's against COVID vaccinations or whether it's against the political establishment. There has been this thread of anti-authoritarianism, anti-elitism, anti-polices, anti-carcerality. And I think that will throw up contradictory questions for particularly the Green Party and your party, who are at least pitching themselves primarily as electoral projects, and so therefore naturally have particular positions that can be quite equivocating and triangulating on questions of the police, carcerality, the political establishment. But also I think we haven't done the theory work of kind of interrogating and providing kind of our own analysis of the political establishment and its power base, carceral systems, the role of the police, the role of a growing authoritarianism, you know, the various different authoritarian bills that Labour and the Conservatives have pushed through Parliament, and just the effect that that has on day-to-day life as well as political life. So I think if you're right, that will also be an element of the rebellion and the movement that takes place.
And do you guys see, like, if this is going to happen, do you guys see it as a continuation of either like an existing movement or set of organizations or trajectories? And I suppose the one on the left that I would point to is obviously the anti-authoritarian work around Defend Our Juries and Palestine Action and the hunger strikers, and like that's obviously the trajectory on the left that feels like it could blow up in some big way. And then obviously on the right, it's the disaggregated protests around hotels housing migrants. Do you think it's either of these two political trends that are going to blow up, or is it going to be something else that feels like it comes out of nowhere?
I think it would be something that doesn't come out of those two existing pools. That is, I mean, I'm always a bit skeptical of the word spontaneous, because actually people do things and they make a decision to do things and lead other people into doing things and struggle over movements, because movements are a terrain. And there's often a hidden organization, right?
Exactly. Like things that look spontaneous from the outside are just built on such incredible levels of organization.
Absolutely. But I wouldn't, what I would say is that I think that kind of hidden organization that you referred to could be quite fresh. Like, these could be new political formations. But I think what you kind of, perhaps what you're alluding to, which I think is really important, that like, this is going to happen in the context of a Labour government, where the kind of the political force that is hegemonizing opposition to Labour is reform. And that's partly why I mean that the left might find it a bit difficult and a bit uncomfortable, because it will be wrestling with a movement with lots of people, I think, who haven't been involved in social movements before. I think this would be much more similar to a Gilets jaunes type movement, the yellow vests in France, for example, than the kinds of social movements we've seen in Britain for the last years. And it depends, right? Because the thing that I'm wrestling with at the minute is, on the one hand, you have these kind of breakthroughs on the industrial front. Like Angela Egan, for example, is now the left leader of Unison, the biggest union in the country. And so you could, and that's as well as Sharon Graham being leader of Unite. So you could prefigure that part of the rebellion would be openings up on the industrial front. But it just seems quite clear to me at the minute, with employment contracting, with consumer spending contracting, that we are entering a recession. And recessions don't typically make themselves conducive towards rebellions in workplaces. If anything, they tend to constrain rebellions in workplaces, though the kind of existence of inflation there does trouble that, because inflation does often produce workers' struggles. The days lost to strike action has increased. The baseline has increased over the last few years since the kind of mini strike wave of 2023. But recessions do make themselves conducive to more forms of street fighting struggle. The recession in the 80s was met with mass riots, for example, with multiracial urban youth across the country, interspersed with the question of racial violence by the state. So yeah, and I really totally agree with Shanice's point. I think it's really, really good. Like, how does the left wrestle with its ambition towards governance and wanting to be part of the political mainstream, at the same time as trying to relate to and be a part of a revolt that has anti-authoritarian streams to it, but perhaps not in the ways that is always comfortable for the left, those anti-authoritarian streams. Big questions.
Yeah, and I think the left has historically got its positioning a bit wrong. So I think of, the concept of two-tier policing, for example, which we know, as it comes from the right, is this attempt to say that the kind of woke left has control over this country's institutions, and the police exist to kind of defend that supposed reality. And we know that that is structurally absolutely not true, but it actually is the case that there is such a thing as two-tier policing, where the police protect the rich, protect the elite, protect people in power, and control and coerce and criminalize the working class. That is a real experience. And so there's often, a question that the left sometimes doesn't get right, which is, how do you take a real experience that people are living, but kind of maybe the framework in which they interpret and understand that experience is, ideologically we disagree with, but how do you relate to that experience, and how do you make sense of that experience, and how do you speak to that experience? And I think we're often not so good at that. I've seen people completely poo-poo the concept of two-tier policing because it's Tommy Robinson who's proliferating it on social media, actually forgetting the reality that there is a system of two-tier policing in this country, and actually we need to speak to that reality.
I also just think, if it is, as you kind of alluded to, Jonas, like a petty bourgeois rebellion to a certain extent, if it's like the Gilets jaunes in France, where it's, it's a lot of self-employed tradesmen and stuff, and that was an anti-green fuel protest, right? Because there were taxes put on fuels. So it's people who drive cars, basically. There was maybe an interesting compositional problem there, in that if you have a rebellion of that sort, and then you have the dominant electoral project being something like the Green Party, which is but concentrate in urban progressive seats and also concentrating on those seats because they're the seats that they can most easily win at the next election. There's just going to be a difficult project of communication between those two tendencies, right? Because they're going to be different people, and it may well be easier for Reform to engage with a rebellion that is like of that character. The other slightly more left field proposition that you can make, and I'm going to make, is that, do we have some kind of white collar rebellion on the horizon? And I'll articulate this as like, look, I think that the AI skeptics that said that AI, is shit and never going to do anything useful were obviously completely wrong. That's just patently not true. Millions of people are using it in their day-to-day lives, for better or worse. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but like, millions of people just are using it, and it's clearly essentially automating some informational components of many people's jobs. And at the moment, it's not going to be massively affecting the amount of jobs that people have, but it's making their jobs more efficient and stuff. It's obviously the case that if AI improves to a certain extent and also remains as cheap as it currently is, a subscription to ChatGPT Plus is 100 something quid a year. it's gonna be far cheaper to use this technology rather than hire more people. And you are already seeing it in, like sectors such as programming and coding. There is a future, maybe it'll happen in this year, maybe it'll happen in the year after, where you see a lot of people who are previously quite well paid, very highly educated, expect to be embedded in the system to a certain extent, who lose their job because of this new technology and then cannot find another because their job, the demand for what they do has been so severely contracted. And I don't necessarily think those people are going to go and, start cooking up Molotovs in their kitchen and then take to the streets like that. But it's interesting when you have this group of people that are suddenly disenfranchised, but actually have quite a lot of power within society. And I'm not a historian, and I don't know of any other historical examples where that's happened. But like that is another form of rebellion that could be on the horizon, depending on how much AI improves as like what I think Adam Tooze calls like a general purpose technology.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a kind of question related to the question of the white collar worker, which is that the floor underneath the graduate jobs market is collapsing completely, basically, at the minute.
Definitely.
Like the ability for graduates to get jobs is diminishing rapidly, and that will make a massive contribution to whether white collar workers or more senior petty bourgeois white collar employees will take to rebellion. But I just think we're in that moment where the possibilities are so open, and the challenge for the left, something like La France Insoumise kind of had a good pop at this, to be honest with you, in the context of the Gilets Jaunes movement. I think in terms of connecting the climate question to the lack of money in people's pocket is a question of articulation. Like, how can you articulate quite heterogeneous layers of the population together? Can you do it? How much is that related to your own composition as an organization or as a social force? I think these are really huge questions for the left over the rest of this decade, basically.
Just to give you an example, I know someone who applied for a research job recently, which is your classic white collar role, has plenty of research experience, including in kind of like political spheres, party political spheres, and was one of over 200 candidates for this role. And you can imagine that you're going to have loads of PhD candidates who can't get jobs in that, loads of, ex-academics who have been shafted, loads of people who have maybe just finished studying, looking for an entry-level job. This was a job that paid under 40k, 200 applicants. And that, for me, is like mind-blowing.
Absolutely.
Okay. Prediction two. Shanice, what you got?
All right. So my big prediction that could very, very much be wrong, but I'm going to make it, is that the Epstein files will be the death knell of MAGA and Trumpism, and that will have reverberations across the entire Western far-right movement. So my rationalization for this is MAGA is already split on Israel. And there are different reasons why MAGA is split on Israel. There's the kind of America First contingent that is very much about this kind of nationalist, we need to have America as the kind of top priority in domestic and international policy making. There is an element of anti-Semitism to it. Why are we giving all the money to the Jews? There's an element of Christian nationalism here, which is that, this is a Christian nation. Why are we supporting kind of other kind of religious national projects? And there's also genuine moral disgust. But all of these things are coming together and already form a split within MAGA. And I think the Epstein files is kind of another place where that fracture is occurring in the MAGA movement. So there have been a few attention points recently that have kind of brought it onto the kind of agenda in the US recently. So government officials meeting in prison with Ghislaine Maxwell and the kind of contents of that meeting and how she responded in that meeting being undisclosed, and that's kind of creating conspiracy theories around what's going on there. Obviously Trump at one point agreeing to release the Epstein files and then not releasing the Epstein files. But also I think there's something ideological and kind of cultural going on here as well. Epstein as a figure, Jeffrey Epstein, ties a lot of MAGA and Trumpist conspiracy theories together. He was Jewish, so there's this idea of, the American white elite being replaced by kind of foreign operatives. He was a billionaire, so he's obviously part of the elite class, and he was very much known to run in elite circles and covet the friendships of people who were culturally, economically, politically significant. He was also connected in some way to Israel. There are lots of conspiracies about his connection to Israel and connection to Mossad, for example. We don't know the exact configuration and boundaries of it, but he was connected to Israel. So that taps into MAGA conspiracies around foreign wars and also, the America First idea. And he was part of the deep state. Again, we don't understand in exactly what ways, but clearly he was. He had friends in all of the high places, all of the major state institutions of the US. And also he kind of represents this demonic anti-American force that is attacking Christian morality, which is kind of central to so many of the kind of MAGA and Trumpist conspiracy theories. So as a figure, he ties all of this together. And so Trump's association with him in sex crimes, again, the concept of sex and libidinal desire is really central to the far right. It's one of the ways that they attack migrants and Muslims, but it's also one of the kind of central organizing principles of Christian nationalism and Christian morality. So Trump's association with him as a figure is potentially quite devastating. And his, I guess, refusal to release the files, refusal to be transparent about his connection to Epstein, all of the kind of little bits of information that are being trickled out, I think are a big threat to his presidency and could potentially really split his base and split his movement. I don't think we should underestimate his ability to shift the narrative. Already the narrative is being shifted onto Bill Clinton and, why didn't Joe Biden release the Epstein files? But it's a potential big fracture. And I think it could reverberate into kind of Britain, where Trump was a big, I guess, cultural, political, metaphorical figure at the Unite the Right rally, hosted by Tommy Robinson and his far-right acolytes. And also he's kind of been central to the expansion of the far-right movement in Europe and elsewhere. So I don't think we should underestimate Trump, but I also don't think we should underestimate the potential for the Epstein files to cause a massive crisis within MAGA, bigger than it already is.
Oh, Jonas needed a swig of Lucozade to deal with that. So I wish I'd screen grabbed that. It's like an advert, mate. It was amazing.
We don't do adverts.
We don't do adverts. As long as you give us money, we won't do adverts. I think that's a really good take, Shanice. I think it's a really good take, and I think what you're describing is an issue that is disruptive for and a wedge within the MAGA movement for sure, because of all the very specific reasons and characteristics of that movement that you described. I think it's also a way of Trump, who is an anti-establishment force in so many different ways, becoming kind of like potentially irrevocably tied to the establishment through this.
Exactly. Through
these scandals and like pushing it off onto Bill Clinton and whatever doesn't necessarily help, because then it's like Trump and Clinton together. I think my question for the UK is, number one, is Farage implicated? This is just obviously we know Farage has gone over and spent a lot of time with Trump and similar far right figures in the US. Is he in the Epstein files? Is he implicated? That will obviously, or that could have massive effects. I think that there could also be unexpected consequences, though, such as, although Trump is the kind of kingpin and driver of and greatest symbol of the international far right and MAGA, he's also a hindrance for some far right leaders in Europe who are trying to orient around respectability. And he's you look at the attack lines that work on Farage. One of them is bringing up his racist past. Another is showing how anti-worker he is, and a third is talking about his proximity to Trump. There's a deep anti-Americanism in the UK, despite our incredibly close relationship with them, and it doesn't benefit Farage to be associated with Trump. So a post-Trump America might inadvertently actually be quite good for Farage specifically. And I suppose the final thing that this makes me think is just that there are going to be so many different parts of the establishment and established parties tied up in this, especially in the US, but potentially in the UK too. Obviously, we know Peter Mandelson's links into this, and that's what got him kicked out as the ambassador to the US. But how many other Labour figures are implicated in the Epstein files? We don't know. But this is clearly a benefit to new forms of organisation, be it your party, Green Party, or others that just aren't tarnished or tainted by this kind of stuff and aren't going to get dragged into it, simply because the people that are involved weren't establishment figures and wouldn't have been invited to these parties,
Yeah, and I think that's exactly it. What it shatters is the idea of Trump as this anti-establishment, anti-deep state figure. And actually, he's a protector of the deep state, a protector of the status quo and the establishment, not even just an enabler, but he's participating in a cover-up. And I don't think we should underestimate the capacity for the shattering of that really core part of far-right populist identity to reverberate back to, for example, Britain, where Nigel Farage is in his own mini crisis around kind of his connections to Russia and the cover up there, and his connections to money. And, he creates an image of himself as like an ordinary man, but actually slowly but surely people are seeing that he's not so ordinary. And I think that kind of identity shattering could be important here too.
I've been toying with whether I agree with you or not, Shanice, but actually, like, hearing you say it, I'm really quite sympathetic to your take. I keep thinking about the expenses scandal when you're speaking, not because they're the same thing, but like I could just feel that like something like this would have that kind of effect that the expenses scandal had, where it just kind of implicates so many people across like the kind of North Atlantic political establishment, like the Clinton, we've talked about Musk, Peter Thiel, the former Treasury Secretary, Larry Summers is kind of invoked in these. And I just think, I'm not necessarily convinced, and I think you're quite qualified about this, and we agree, like that this would be the thing that tips Trump over the edge. But the thing is, Trumpism is in lots of ways not doing great at the minute. And, people have less purchasing power, lots of middle-class people in America being forced into service work to survive. The kind of labor movement is, experiencing growth and signs of recovery. And then you have this kind of mass movement against ICE, which is really well organized across the country. And I just think like this on top of it, this like it kind of splitting the MAGA coalition, particularly the conspiracy wing, like down the middle, is like, can be quite disastrous for Trumpism and for MAGA more broadly. But some people have, and I think in the short term it will be. I think you're totally right. But then there's this question, isn't there? And it's always, the kind of liberals in particular always talk about it a lot because, will Trump change the rules so he can run for a third term, or is this the end of Trump? Like it poses that question a bit of like what is MAGA after Trump? Who kind of takes on the mantle? Yep. How does it remake itself? And actually, when you look at the Epstein files and you look at what this does to the MAGA coalition and what this does to the reputation of a person like Trump within his own coalition, it kind of really makes that question of remaking a bit more pertinent.
Yeah, for sure. And on a basic level, like even if it doesn't completely destroy it, it seems really well designed to disrupt their. Have you guys come across the phrase OODA loop?
No.
Do you know OODA loop? Dominic Cummings loves talking about OODA loops. I spent a lot of time reading his blog back in the day. Basically, an OODA loop is like this US like military thing, and it's how you think about and respond to a problem. And it's like there's always these 4 steps: like observe, orient, decide, and act. And it's kind of like it's a way of organizations and individuals like responding to stuff. And one of the things that they always emphasize is you want to like disrupt the enemy's OODA loop. So you want to make it hard for the enemy to go through this observe, orient, decide, and act phase quickly. And a scandal like this, which just like completely fucks with the foundations of a movement or an organization or a set of individuals, will just introduce such chaos into the system that they won't be able to observe, orient, decide, and act, and they won't be able to just kind of drive forward with the agenda that they did after Trump got in. There are things that can happen in the world that can make us stronger, but there are also things that happen in the world that make our opponents weaker. And obviously, by comparison, that makes us stronger. And this just seems absolutely to be one of those.
And our opponents across the political spectrum as well. We're not just talking about the far-right movement.
For sure.
We're talking about the centre and the liberal establishment as well.
100%.
Yeah, I mean, this is a crisis for basically everybody but us.
Yeah.
You know, which is our kind of crisis. All right. Final prediction. Mine. I have the most boring prediction. But someone had to make this prediction because we do have to talk about this. It's important. I predict that Keir Starmer won't be Labour leader by the end of 2026. And the reason I think that is the case is because unless you haven't noticed, he's doing a really bad job. And nothing that he does seems to improve the situation. None of the various, crises that are making it so hard for Labour to govern at the moment. Most obviously the fact that we don't have growth that they can just, divide up between capital and the working class in the way that Blair did during the New Labour years, and that everything has this kind of like zero-sum feeling to it. Like none of that's going away. Starmer just doesn't seem to have shown any ability to kind of paper over these cracks with any kind of bombast or charisma or whatever in the way that other leaders have managed to do, at least for a short period. And the May elections are probably just going to be disastrous, absolutely disastrous for him. I think it's also the case that there's a kind of in the way that Zach Polanski kicked off the timeline of Zara leaving the Labour Party and founding your party, and Zara and Jeremy not wanting to be kind of outflanked by the Greens and everyone just going to the Greens because they haven't got their act together. In the same way in Labour, you have the right of the party very eager to kick off a leadership election before Andy Burnham gets into Parliament. And there is this kind of ticking clock for the West Streetings of this world, who is clearly on manoeuvres at the moment. It's like, well, okay, like how quickly can I get this to happen? Because we really don't want Andy in Parliament, because it just seems like Burnham would maybe not completely walk a leadership election, but would be like the very, very firm favourite. So I think this crisis that Labour are in, and Starmer specifically is in, the lack of authority he has in the party now, the disaster that May is going to be for them, unless we end up in a war or something a new war between now and then. And the fact that the right of the party feel a sense of urgency about kicking off a leadership election, I think means that we are likely to have one this year. Like people I talk to inside the party of the current MPs would put their money on Rayner if she goes for it. And I think I probably would too. But obviously, there's this big question about whether Burnham can get a seat in time. I think the last thing to say is that we should update our assumptions around Streeting and his viability with Labour membership. That, it used to be the case that we all said, and I very much said, the Labour membership will never vote for Wes Streeting. Wes Streeting's, complete lame duck because of all of his, association with the right of the party and his various right-wing positions, and especially in the wake of Starmer basically lying to the Labour membership to get into the leadership. I think we have to update that assumption a bit, because there's just been such huge churn and change in the Labour membership and who can vote. Like, a lot of people have left Labour either to be in no party at all, or join the Greens, or join your party. I don't think we've got official membership figures out yet, but they come out at the end of the year, every year for Labour. So I'm sure we'll see another fall. And some recent polls have shown that Streeting, has a shot. And there is a route to the leadership through the membership for him. And that's definitely a new thing. So yeah, that's my prediction. Starmer will not be leader of the Labour Party by the end of 2026.
Yeah, I mean, I basically agree with all of this. Like it's worth saying that, Angela Egan is the leader of Unison now, which changes the balance on the Labour Party National Executive Council. And that basically means that the chances, which were previously quite slim, of Andy Burnham being able to become a parliamentarian have now increased. There will also be NEC elections later in the year as well, which will, presumably have an interest and effect on the kind of makeup that was once favourable to Keir Starmer.
Although just to caveat that, Jonas, it is the power that Egan has over the Unison reps and the NEC is informal. She can't just direct them to vote the way that she wants. And I think it's like the Labour Link Committee, which is the people that I think elect the Unison people to the Labour's NEC, are actually quite right wing compared to the new leadership of Unison. So you know what I mean? Like I think you're right. It does increase the chances of Burnham being able to get a seat, but it's not a direct line of Egan can just go and tell them which way to vote. It's not that she doesn't have that much power.
Are they? I mean, I don't know like the composition of the people who would be the representatives on the NEC. Are they right wing in terms of unison, or right wing in terms of the Labour Party? Because they're two quite different things, right?
Good question. I'm not sure. Further right than Angela. Put it that way.
Okay, yeah. I mean, she had an interview with Politics Home a while ago where she referred to kind of joyously and quite supportedly to Burnham as the King of the North. Said she didn't like Angela. She's not a fan of Ange, is what she said in the interview.
Really?
Yeah,
she said that publicly?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, interesting.
And you can see a situation here where Angela Rayner is kind of hedging her bets a little bit, right? Like not really coming out with what the plan is. I think she's writing a book at the minute or something like that, as you do as a politician. And West Streeting, I think I maybe disagree a little bit on the West Streeting thing. I think it's clear that the Labour membership has shrunk. But I'd be surprised if the general vibe and feeling of the Labour membership still isn't of the kind of soft left, basically. And I just think that's much more favourable to people like Rayner and Burnham if he's able to get the ticket. And partly I think you see that a little bit in Streeting, because Streeting has flirted with the idea of a joint ticket with Angela Rayner. She's hedging her bedges. She's hedging her bets.
Hedging her bedges. I like that.
What's a bedge? She's hedging her bets.
What is a bedge?
And so, I mean, but the bottom line is, I mean, this is completely interminable crisis for the party of government. It is pretty spectacular. I really agree that Starmer won't be around by the end of 2026. And of course, there is someone else who's hedging their bets, which is Zach Polanski, who has kind of explicitly now said that, obviously I'll never go into a coalition with Keir Starmer. The guy's a disaster. But, if the leadership changes, then I would be open to the possibility, which then throws up loads of questions, not just kind of questions of politics, but also questions of strategy and electoral calculation, because Labour and the Greens, even if Zach wants a coalition to kind of keep out reform, will be competing over similar seats in some parts of the country. So there's lots of interesting stuff that's thrown up by the possibility of a collapse of Starmerism.
It's a great attack line from Zach Polanski as well, because it plays on how Keir Starmer has modelled himself, which is, when he won the general election last year, he was like, I'm going to be a prime minister for the country. I'm going to put country before personal ambition. And he's modelled himself as this kind of honest, selfless public servant. And so Zach Polanski saying that, well, look, your leadership has been a disaster. You have supported policies that have immiserated the country, put children into poverty, attacked the disabled. I can't on principle work with you. However, we can combine and join forces to stop reform if you step down. I mean, that puts potentially Keir Starmer in a bit of a moral sticky situation. Are you going to continue to be prime minister for your own personal or individual reasons, or are you going to open up the possibility of electoral alliance that could stop reform, but the cost of that being that you need to step down? And actually, that's a really good strategic position for Zach to put his Green Party in. Do I, and it's part of the reason why I'm not a member of the Green Party, do I think that kind of electoralism is my bag? Is it the kind of thing that I want to be focusing on politically at the moment? It is not. But you got to admire Zach Polanski coming in as a fairly fresh politician, and certainly a fresh leading politician at that national scale, positioning himself in these quite clever and smart ways.
I mean, Starmer just did this all to himself as well. There was just no. It's just fucking stupid. He could have won the leadership election and just run a social democratic big tent Labour Party where they didn't try and kick out all of the left wing MPs, and they didn't kick out fucking Neil Lawson from Compass, soft left organisation, and they broadly tried to cohere social democratic bloc, which is precisely the strategy that it should have done as far as we can tell. It's not like loads of these people that are voting for reform are coming back to Labour just because of tack to the right with regards to immigration. And, he's put himself in this situation where he's toxified himself so much that he now has an insurgent left-wing challenger, the leader of which could never work with Starmer because it would fundamentally undercut his appeal. Zach Polanski would just be dead in the water if he worked with Starmer, and he knows
exactly,
it.
Yeah.
And Starmer just did this to himself. And it's just so weird. Because it's so weird. Because like, I think I buy that he is a bit of an authoritarian, but I don't really buy that he's not like a generally progressive social democrat. Like, I think that's probably...
But this is the contradiction of government, right? And governing. There are things that Starmer had to do to win the election and kind of seize control of the Labour Party in order to position himself as leader and then become Prime Minister. And then there's the contradiction of, well, what do you do when you actually get in power? And can you actually significantly change people's experience of the country, of life, of comfortability, of the cost of living crisis, to actually take people on that journey with you? And the fundamentals of the answer will know, not with the kind of economic framework of neoliberalism and sticking with that economic paradigm. And so, I mean, that's the huge contradiction that I think the Conservatives faced, that Labour face, and that Reform will face if they make it to government as well.
But I just don't buy that his war on the left they embarked on after winning the leadership was a good electoral calculation. Like, they ended up winning the election, but really, really fortunately, to be honest, because their vote ended up being super, super efficient. They had like a very low vote total. And I just don't think all of that incredible disunity was worth it for them. I think the only way to understand it is that there's a right-wing faction around Starmer who care more about ensuring that the left are blasted out to space, or, as Peter Mandelson said, like, you know, sealed in a tomb to never come back or whatever. There's a faction that care more about that than they do about winning an election, and they were just fucking lucky. They were just lucky to win an election, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few things here that's worth passing out. I mean, I think one of the interesting things about Keir Starmer is what kind of creature he is. Like, he comes... No, but seriously,
I'm sorry, what?
Seriously, like, he's someone who like governed over like a massive state institution for ages, like and brings with that all of the kind of, you know, because you're right, you know, he wrote for a socialist publication when he was at university, like, he considered himself a socialist, like, and a progressive, but then he was ensconced into these institutions.
Well, he just lives in Camden as well. You know what I mean? Like,
don't diss Camden too much, you know, like, seriously. I do think like the fact that like he's ensconced into these massive state institutions for quite a long part of his life affects the way he thinks and the way that he understands the world, you know, the things that he's been complicit in. You know, we heard lots about his human rights record when he was running for leader, less so about the kind of stories that were uncovered by people like Oliver Eagleton in his book about Starmer, about how he responded to social movements, how he treated the national liberation struggle in the north of Ireland, all of these sorts of questions that kind of actually lead you to a picture that this guy is a product of the British state more than anything, and that colours how he thinks and how he acts. And, you know, obviously the starting point for the project that he had was a counter-revolution against Corbynism, and then just making this massive, stupid mistake, which, you know, I don't mind, because I want to see his demise, frankly. I don't like him. He's my enemy. Where he thought that's the approach that you could have going into government. And you could just turn on easy mode as it got you elected when you enter the corridors of power. And it's been an absolute catastrophe for him. And now he's digesting the bad fruits of his labour. So yeah, good riddance, basically.
Yeah, and it just reminds me, you know, this is the guy who was director of public prosecutions in 2011 and sent a guy to prison for, I think it was like 16 or 18 months for nicking an ice cream. And so, you know, it's no surprise that the authoritarian direction that Labour is going in now is being spearheaded by a man like Keir Starmer. So I found the word creature funny, but you're absolutely right.
I don't think we've ever got to have a good bitch about Starmer on this.
No, we haven't.
No, or Trump. Or Trump.
Yeah, or Trump. I mean, this will be, to be honest, like, if the Labour Party is, in a certain sense, quote unquote, back in the picture this year, because you have a social democratic leader who's doing deals with Zach Polanski, it'll be great for our podcast because we'll have 3 parties to talk about rather than 2.
Oh, we're not going to have to stick Andy Burnham's face on the podcast.
No. There's no room. There's no room.
Split.
No. There's no room for that. There's no room for that. Even just from a graphic design perspective, that won't work.
But no, look.
But you know, they're just going to be more of a player. You know what I mean? Like what Burnham does and says is going to matter more for the position of the Greens.
And look, I do, you know, to go back to a conversation we had on episode 8, I think it does kind of lend itself to tragically, I think, to the argument that you made on that episode, Joe, that I think in terms of politics and parliamentarism, it does close down the space for your party just a little bit more and forces this new, fresh political party to wonder what it is best served doing over the course of the next 5 years.
And actually, I think this is precisely why your party, the Greens, and the left more generally, having a clear voice on kind of anti-establishment, anti-elitism, anti-authoritarianism is important, because, you know, whether or not Andy Burnham becomes leader of the Labour Party, he will still be in the shadow of Keir Starmer's Labour Party. He will still be kind of understood as being a representative of that part of the political establishment, and that's not something he'll just be able to shake by being king of the north. And the contradictions that, you know, Keir Starmer faced, Andy Burnham will face as well, and have to equivocate and triangulate and kind of make those compromising decisions. And I think if your party has, you know, a solid position, not just that personally attacks Keir Starmer's politics, but as a broader critique of Labourism and the Labour Party, not Labourism as in trade unionism, etc., but Labourism as in the Labour Party, I think that will be really important to its electoral and political prospects moving forward.
For sure. And I find it very, very interesting that Social Democrats like Andy Burnham and, you know, people in Compass, the group that kind of align with him and back him up, talking about the bond markets and gilt markets, and that's already a conversation before he even becomes leader of the Labour Party. It's such an interesting expression of the zero-sum nature in which all political leaders are operating now. That Social Democrats are forced to consider the power of financial markets in the way that socialists consider the power of financial markets and what they might do to us if we ever win power. And, you know, maybe there's room for productive short-term alliances there because you're pushed into similar situations. I don't know. Don't want to end on that point, though.
I think it's a perfect ending point.
Oh, might just cut that out so I don't sound wet.
You should have it, and then you should have just 30 seconds of pure silence that exists, and then swing to the next.
Right, so this is the part of the show where we talk about what we are reading at the moment. So, Shanice, what are you reading?
So I am reading Cedric Robinson's Black Marxism. And in the last episode, I actually spoke a little bit about kind of my political orientation and what my politics are. And yeah, I guess I'm reading Black Marxism to try to understand Marxism and class politics, but through that racial lens. I think that's going to be increasingly important in the kind of climate that we're in, where we have kind of rising xenophobia, Islamophobia and racism at the same time as a kind of rising class populism from the left. And I think us having a kind of solid analysis on the connections between race and class will be helpful. So I'm deep diving into texts that help me to understand that.
Cool.
I haven't read it all, but so far I've picked up some useful bits.
No one reads whole books. Don't worry. No one does that.
Except Jonas. Jonas reads 10 whole books a week.
Except Jonas. I'm rereading a book for a report that I'm just finishing, or maybe we'll be finishing it, even will be out at this point, on the DSA and the PTB, which is, by the way, my excuse for talking about those two organisations so much. I'm not obsessed. I'm just working on them at the moment. It's called The Populist Moment by Anton Jaeger and Arthur Borrelio, and it came out ages ago, 2023, and it's basically a survey of the kind of populist party attempts in Greece with Syriza 2012-2015, Podemos in Spain, Corbynism in the UK, LFI in France, and the Sanders Moment in the US. And you know, it's a very useful kind of, I'd say, like outside summary of what went on a lot of those movements through that period, and attempting to knit them together through the frame of populism, drawing from Laclau and Mouffe and others. I mean, you know, as someone that was an active participant in Corbynism, I definitely have my critiques of the book, because you read the Corbynism chapter from the outside, and so there's just quite a bit that is either a little bit imprecise or not quite right. But there isn't another book like it, to be honest. And I think for anyone engaging in in a party project at the moment, like you have to learn the lessons of Syriza, of Corbynism, Podemos, LFI, and he really does like situate these next to each other. So even though I've got my reservations about it, I'd really recommend the read. It's called The Populist Moment: The Left After the Great Recession. And Jonas, what you got?
Yeah, Assad Haider's Mistaken Identity was a book that came out in the mid-2010s. Assad Haider recently passed away. Rest in peace to him. He had like a huge influence on my Marxism, in the mid-2010s when I felt quite listless and confused and was kind of looking for kind of analytical tools that could help me through that kind of period of time. His work in particular, but also the kind of offshoots of his work. So he co-founded Viewpoint magazine in the States with Salah Mohandesi and some others, and just so much of the translation work they did on Workers' Inquiry and the work of Daniel Ben Said and some of kind of Michel Foucault's work at its most Marxist was amazing. And some of the stuff that he wrote with his co-author and independently, like his essay Marx is Making a Living, which was all about having a kind of expanded sense of what class is and the kind of arenas of class struggle beyond just the factory floor, but also the home, the neighborhood, that was really influential for me. And Mistaken Identity, I went back and read it after his passing, and it's just such a rich book. It's a tiny little book, but it had such a huge impact on the US left when you talk to socialists and Marxists over there. And it feels a bit weird reading it now, because it's like that kind of moment of peak liberal identity politics, of Hillary Clinton talking about Bernie bros, for example, is quite hollow now, actually, when you think about Kamala Harris and the recent Democratic primary race. But I just think it's brilliant. It's some of the best discussions on racial essentialism, on Stuart Hall, and I just really encourage everyone to engage a bit, and also to engage with his PhD, which is about the question of the party and organization, drawing on the Italian and French Communist parties. And I just think in all of his writing, that question of the party is always lingering subtly around it. So yeah, RIP to him. Really huge contribution to the movement.
Cool. Well, thank you, Jonas. Thank you, Shanice. Thank you, everybody, for listening. You can find us on Twitter, on Instagram. If you like what we do and you want to support, you can donate or become a regular supporter at lifeoftheparty.uk. And if you want to email us, you can email us at podlifeoftheparty@gmail.com. We do read every email. We respond to every email, and some emails even make it onto the show. So yeah, thank you, everybody, for listening. We will see you in 2 weeks.
Laters.
Peace out.